Hi, I'm ED-SKaR, and this is Doc Dorden, Chief Medical Officer of the 10th 1st and Only Infantry Regiment, known also as the 10th 1st, the Belladon 81st 1st, the 10th 1st 81st, and colloquially as Gaunt's Ghosts. This model and the others in the set are based on a series of books by Dan Abnett released through Games Workshop's Black Library. The models were released quite some time ago, and while I did start painting them at the time, I really didn't get very far. And when I dug them up recently, I stripped all the paint off and reprimed them and decided I'd have another go. At the time when I bought these, I really didn't have much in the way of community help or learning when it comes to painting, or in fact very much else in the way of this hobby. And while I've always been extremely enthusiastic about cutting things apart and sticking them back together, the expert application of paint requires a little more finesse, and many techniques that I just had not heard of. I'd heard of edge highlighting and dry brushing, but very little beyond that, and it's only very recently, getting back into the mini painting hobby, that I've found the wonderful resources that many people have posted online about different painting techniques. Thinning your paints, that's something I'd never heard of. Using a wet palette, no one told me back in the day, but now it seems fairly common and a tool that I've taken to using. So Doc Dorden is of course a fundamental character in the Gaunt's Ghosts series, appearing in just about every book and several short stories as well. As Chief Medical Officer, he is responsible for many of the ghosts not being literal ghosts. Rather, the nickname of the regiment comes from them being expert at stealth and scouting, so they appear as ghosts rather than actually being ghosts. The colour scheme was another consideration that I made when deciding how to paint this model. Usually you would expect the apron of a medical officer to be white, but in this case I chose to go with a much more striking red colour, and that was a deliberate attempt to partly avoid using the colour white, which is notoriously difficult to paint, but also to have some colour match with the other models in the set when they're complete, because there will be no other white. There will be some other red, although not that much. And it's not unreasonable for a medical apron to be red. Historically, medical uniforms and even rooms have been painted red for unfortunately obvious reasons. The first thing that's specific to this model is one slight modification I have made. And the reason for that modification is Dorden's adherence to what we in the current world would know as the Hippocratic Oath, first do no harm. And while that is a very rare sentiment in the 41st millennium, possibly even going so far as to be considered heretical in some places, Doc Dorden from Counterprise, Tanith Magna, is a strong supporter of such an oath. And as such, he does not bear arms. And so when this model came with a las pistol clutched tightly in a fist, it didn't seem right. Now there is of course one sequence in one of the books where he does use a las pistol, but that is the exception and not the rule. And so the model portraying that he was carrying a las pistol as if he's carrying it more regularly, I just didn't see right. And so in my youthful exuberance, I cut that away. Now, I didn't do a particularly good job of cleaning it up, and so more recently I've sanded away at his hands to try and neaten that up, and we'll see when we get to painting the skin how successful I've been there. The rest of the colour scheme is not particularly groundbreaking. The 10th 1st and Only's uniform is black, and so his jacket and trousers were black. And given that I'd made the apron so striking red, I felt that the medical bags that he's carrying, if they were brown, it wouldn't be too out of place. Although I did mix up a slightly different shade of brown for each one of those. As we move into painting the skin here, I'll say that pretty much everything on this model was a single colour base coat, and then that colour mixed with a lighter version of the colour as the highlights. And I didn't just do one highlight, I was mixing and wet blending and layering and sort of just playing around. not really following any single technique properly. But when it came to the skin, Doc Dorden, being an old man as he is, having a ruddy complexion would make a lot of sense. And so I used the red that I'd used for the apron to base coat his skin. I even mixed in some of the yellow that was the highlight for the apron to let that down just a little bit so that it wasn't too kind of obnoxiously red. And then when I came in with the flesh tone over the top, it did give him a somewhat unhealthy look, which is maybe a bit unfair, but not outside his character, shall we say. And just while I'm finishing up the skin here, I'll regale you with probably the most well-known story of Doc Dorden in, I think it was either Straight Silver or Guns of Tanith. And this story involves another one of the Tanith First and Only, named Costin. Now Costin is unfortunately a drunk and substance abuser, which is pretty bad to begin with, but when you're in the field trying to hide from the Blood Pact, it can become a problem not just for you, but for everyone around you. And in this case, it did. In a drunken mistake, Costin lit up his position and brought down an enemy unit upon them, and during that fight, they lost a lot of other soldiers. Somehow, Costin managed to survive, and that somehow was Doc Dorden, who happened to be close enough to help. After being rescued in the fight and having Doc Dorden sew his innards back together, Colonel Commissar Gaunt found out about the incident, and while Costin was still unconscious, Gaunt leaned into the Commissar half of his rank and declared a summary execution for Costin, who was drunk in the field and got several of his squad killed. Now at this moment, Dorden stood in between Colonel Commissar Gaunt's bolt pistol and the still wounded Costin, demanding mercy of his own commanding officer and Commissar. Dorden's stand was seen by Gaunt as undermining his authority, as it very well was, but it was also an act of mercy for a wounded man. After recovering, Costin swore off of drink, and I'm sure he's clean now. Anyway, I'm told that both Costin and Doc Dorden make an appearance in Salvation's Reach, which is the next book that I will be reading in my reread of the Gaunt's Ghost series, so I'm totally looking forward to their involvement in this book. But with all that said, and this model nearing completion, I'll just play out the last sequence and then come to a conclusion in a few moments. And there we have the model completed. You'll notice that I haven't done the base, and that is deliberate. I plan to do all of the basing for the set at the end. But the model itself is done, so this can go on my shelf with my other sci-fi human models, most of which are 40k, but not all. And I'll leave you with some close-up shots of my work. I'm, as I've said, not a particularly amazing painter, but this is certainly suitable for what I had in mind. And I have managed to get his tired eyes. Anyway, I'm ED-SKaR, always will be, and thank you very much for watching.